Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into Numbers chapter 11. And let's just say this part of the wilderness journey starts with, well, immediate drama. Things are not going smoothly.
Not smoothly at all. The chapter literally opens with the people complaining, openly complaining about their hardships.
And it's not just quiet grumbling. The text says the Lord hews it, every word.
He does. And the reaction is pretty swift and severe. His anger flares up.
Yeah, fire from the Lord breaks out. It actually starts consuming the edges of the camp. Imagine seeing that.
Terrifying. A very direct, very visual response to their complaints right at the start.
So the people, understandably, cry out to Moses.
Right. And Moses does what he often does. He prays. He intercedes for them.
And the fire dies down, thankfully.
Yes. But the place gets a name because of this, doesn't it?
It does. Tabara.
Kabra, meaning burning. Because, like the text says, the fire of the Lord had burned among them there. A pretty stark reminder.
You'd think that might quiet things down for a bit.
You might think. Yeah. But nope. Almost immediately, a different problem surfaces.
Another complaint.
Another complaint. This time it starts with what the text calls the rabble among them, but it seems to catch on quickly.
And soon the Israelites themselves are wailing again. What's the issue this time?
Food. Specifically the lack of meat. Their cry is just, if only we had meat to eat.
Ah, the nostalgia kicks in. They start remembering Egypt.
Oh, yeah. With very selective memory, it seems. They talk about the fish they ate there, supposedly at no cost.
Right. And cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic. Quite the menu they recall.
It sounds almost idyllic the way they describe it, and they contrast it so sharply with their current situation.
What do they say about now?
Basically, we've lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna.
Even though the manna itself is miraculous.
Exactly. But it's become mundane to them. Familiarity breeding contempt, maybe?
The text actually pauses here to describe the manna again, which is interesting timing.
It is. It reminds us what they do have. It looked like coriander seed, with an appearance like resin.
And the routine around it sounds quite involved.
Daily work, yeah. Going out, gathering it, then grinding it in hand mills or crushing it in mortars.
Cooking it in pots or making it into, like, little cakes.
And it even gives a taste comparison like something made with olive oil.
And it just appeared every night.
Every night, with the dew. So the provision was consistent. It was there, every single day.
Sustenance, provided supernaturally, yet they're focused entirely on the meat they don't have.
In all this wailing, it really gets to Moses.
You can feel his burden increasing. He hears it everywhere.
Yes, the text says people of every family were wailing, each one right at the entrance of their own tent. It's widespread.
And God is angry, but Moses, he's described as troubled.
Deeply troubled. And he basically unloads on God. It's quite a raw prayer or complaint.
What does he say?
He asks God, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What did I do to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me?
He feels completely responsible.
Entirely. His questions are so pointed. Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth? Why me? Why tell me to carry them like a nurse carries an infant?
Wow. That's incredibly personal.
It is, and he throws their demand back at God. They keep wailing to me, give us meat to eat. He's caught in the middle.
He sounds utterly exhausted by it, overwhelmed.
He explicitly says so. I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me.
It's a moment of real vulnerability. Have you ever encountered that kind of just, I can't do this anymore feeling in leadership descriptions?
It resonates, doesn't it? Even in these ancient texts. That feeling of being completely depleted by the demands.
And he goes even further, doesn't he? A really drastic request.
He does. He basically says, if this is how you're going to treat me, please just kill me now.
Right.
If I've found favor in your eyes, let me out of this misery.
That's intense. Asking for death.
It shows the absolute depth of his despair at this moment. He sees no other way out.
So how does God respond to Moses' plea and also to the people's demand for meat?
Well, God responds to both very directly. First, addressing Moses' burden.
Okay, what's the solution for him?
God tells him to gather 70 men, elders of Israel, people known to be leaders among the people.
Just gather them?
Gather them and bring them to the tent of meeting so they can stand there with Moses.
Ah, so sharing the load somehow.
Exactly. God says he will come down, speak with Moses there, and then, this is key, he will take some of the spirit that is on Moses and put it on the 70 elders.
Wow, a distribution of the Spirit.
Precisely. So they can share the burden of the people with Moses. He won't have to carry it alone anymore. It's a divine delegation, you could say.
That must have been some relief for Moses to hear. What about the people, though, the ones wailing for meat?
God tells Moses to tell them, consecrate yourself. Get ready for tomorrow.
Why?
Because God has heard them. He heard their wailing, heard them saying they were better off in Egypt.
He's going to give them meat.
Oh, yes. The promise is clear. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it.
Okay. But there's a catch, isn't there? I sense a catch.
There's a huge catch. It's not just for a day or two. They will eat it for a whole month.
A whole month? That's
Incredible.
a lot of meat.
Until, and this is the graphic part, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it.
Ugh. Wow, that's turning the blessing into something else entirely. Why so harsh?
God gives the reason. Because you have rejected the Lord who is among you and have wailed before him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt?
So it wasn't really about the meat itself.
It seems the craving and the complaint symbolize a deeper rejection. A rejection of God's presence and his rescue plan. It was about their hearts.
How does Moses react to this promise, the month of meat part?
Moses, ever the pragmatist, immediately questions the logistics. He's like, wait a minute.
He does the math.
He basically says, look, there are 600,000 men on foot here. And you say, you'll give them meat for a whole month.
He can't see how it's possible.
Not humanly possible, no. He asks, would slaughtering all our flocks and herds be enough? Would catching all the fish in the sea be enough? He's thinking purely in terms of resources.
It's a very logical human reaction.
Absolutely. And God's reply just cuts right through all that.
What does God say?
A simple, powerful question. Is the Lord's arm too short?
Meaning, is God's power limited?
Exactly. And then a statement. You will now see whether or not what I say will come true for you. It's a challenge and a promise of demonstration.
Okay, so Moses must relay all this. He gathers the elders.
He does. He tells the people what God said, gathers the 70 elders, and positions them around the tent of meeting.
And then God appears.
Yes. The Lord comes down in the cloud, speaks with Moses, and then does what he promised.
The spirit transfer.
Takes some of the spirit from Moses, puts it on the 70 elders.
You know what happens?
Immediately, they prophesy. The text notes it was sort of a one-time thing in this specific instance. They didn't continue doing it right then.
But then there's that strange little side story.
Yes. Eldad and Medad, two of the men who were supposed to be among the 70 at the tent.
But they weren't there.
No, for some reason they had stayed behind in the camp.
Yeah.
But the Spirit comes upon them too, right there in the camp.
And they start prophesying among the tents.
Exactly. Away from the official gathering,
Yeah.
which causes a bit of a stir.
Someone notices.
Yeah, a young man runs and tells Moses, hey, Eldad and Medad are prophesying back in the camp.
And Joshua steps in, Moses' right-hand man.
Joshua, who's been with Moses since he was young, immediately says, Moses, my lord, stop them.
He sees it as irregular, unauthorized maybe.
Seems like it. Maybe a threat to Moses' authority or just out of order.
But Moses' reaction is amazing.
It really is. He turns to Joshua and asks, basically, are you jealous for my sake?
He doesn't feel threatened at all.
Not in the slightest. Instead, he says something incredible.
What's that?
I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets and that the Lord would put his spirit on them.
Wow. Instead of wanting to control it, he wishes it would spread even further.
It's such a generous, broad-minded perspective on
Yeah.
spiritual gifting and leadership. Really remarkable.
So after that moment, Moses and the elders head back to the camp.
They do. And the focus shifts back to the people and that promise of meat.
The quail.
The quail. A wind comes from the Lord, driving them in from the sea.
And it's not just a few.
Not at all. The description is overwhelming. They land all around the camp, apparently low to the ground, maybe 3 feet up.
Easy to catch them.
Very. And they cover an area extending a day's walk in every direction. Just imagine the scene.
The people must have gone wild.
Totally. They spent all day, all night, and all the next day just gathering quail. Non-stop.
How much did they get?
The text says no one gathered less than 10 homers, which is a ridiculously large amount, and an unbelievable quantity of birds.
What did they do with them all?
Spread them out all around the camp. Drying them, maybe? Preserving them?
But just as they get this thing they craved so intensely,
The judgment falls, swiftly. The text is chillingly specific. While the meat was still between their teeth, before they'd even really consumed it.
God's anger burns against them.
And he strikes them with a severe plague.
So they got what they wanted in overwhelming abundance.
And it became the very instrument of their destruction. A really harsh lesson.
And just like Tapera, this place gets a name too.
It does. Kibroth Hatava.
Which means?
Something like graves of craving or graves of intense desire.
Why?
Because, the text says, that's where they buried the people who had been consumed by that craving for meat. Another grim memorial.
And that's pretty much the end of the episode in the camp there.
Yes. The chapter wraps up by noting their next move. From Kibroth Hatava, they traveled on to Hazeroth and stayed there for a while.
So, looking back at this whole chapter, this deep dive, what a roller coaster.
It really is. You see this cycle. Hardship, complaint, God's response, sometimes judgment, sometimes provision, then more dissatisfaction, leadership breaking under the strain.
Followed by divine intervention again, both for the leader and the people, but with severe consequences for that relentless craving.
It tells you a lot about, well, human nature, doesn't it? The burden of leadership, certainly. But also that tension between gratitude for what you have and discontent over what you lack.
And that ending with the quail and the plague. Kibrath Atava. It really makes you think.
It does. It leaves you pondering,
Yeah.
They got exactly what they screamed for, an overabundance of it. And it was disastrous. How does that challenge our own ideas about getting what we think we desperately want? Is fulfilling every craving always the path to satisfaction?
A sobering thought to end on. That maybe getting exactly what you crave isn't always the blessing you imagine it to be.